Hey everybody, and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not News, your favorite podcast about fake news. I'm Beth.
And I'm Kelly.
Hey Kelly, how's it going today?
It's going pretty good. How are you?
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm doing really good. I've been working on remodeling my house, and I've been really moving things around and getting them in the correct order for how I want my house to be.
Beth, have you been redistricting your house?
I have been.
Have you been doing it along proper partisan lines?
I've been doing it along proper tile grout lines.
Oh, okay.
That's how it goes. Yeah.
Do you have any odd shapes in your redecoration?
You've seen my house. My house is like a gerrymandered district. It is a maze, and people get lost, and they don't understand what happened.
It is a maze. I've gotten lost in your basement.
It is pretty funny. My house is people see my house, and it looks really small from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come in, and it's not small, and there's lots of hallways and stairs and
lots of
more
stairs. Yeah, so many stairs.
Circles and squares and triangles.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've been trying to redistrict some things around, and I thought, you know what, Kelly, let's do our third episode on voting about gerrymandering.
Why not, right? It really is one of those things that really affects every single election since it was very first invented back in 1812, right?
Well, was gerrymandering invented? Tell me about this.
I think it was just named back in 1812 because it was such a blatant. So gerrymandering, just to back up a step and just define what the term is, gerrymandering is in United States politics, it's the drawing of boundaries of electoral districts in a way that gives one party an unfair advantage over its rivals.
Okay, so redistricting, though, that is something that has to happen, right?
It is, and usually it happens after each census, for sure. It's supposed to happen definitely after each census, but it definitely, I know, I can't apparently say the word census.
I'm just trying to think of non-dirty jokes about redistricting and census. And for some reason, I'm struggling. I don't know.
That's all right.
Okay, so every 10 years, there's a census in the United States. Right. And they basically gather all the information about how many people live in the U.S. and where. And that's important because our House of Representatives, our Congress, is based on that. And the number of seats in Congress, isn't it the number stays the same, but how the districts are laid out can be changed around?
That's right. The number of the representatives stays the same, but the number of people they represent can change.
Right. So let's say in 10 years, a whole bunch of people moved from California to Wyoming. There was a big run on horse ranches.
All right, then.
People in California were like, look, we're out of room. Wyoming's got room. And they have internet now. So we can move there.
Let's go.
And so they do this census 10 years later, and they find out that the population of California has decreased by 1 million and Wyoming has increased by 1 million. So Wyoming would now need more representation than it had 10 years ago. So they look at that and they redistrict and they say, okay, so now Wyoming has this many representatives needed in order to represent correctly its population, whereas California needs this many. So it is important that it does happen, because if that never changed, we'd be having representation from the 1910s, population base in our states.
Right.
That would not be good. Things have changed.
Exactly. And it doesn't just affect the national representatives. It also affects your local state representatives as well, right?
I believe it does. Yeah, it does. There's differences on both. So it is important that they gather this information and that they do redistricting. But then, because redistricting has 3 features to it. Number 1, it has to be done. Number 2, it's boring. And number 3, it can be manipulated, kind of like your taxes.
Yes.
And so people, even all the way back in, 1812, figured out, hey, I can use this to my advantage. And I want to win. I want my party to win. And in order to win, it's more important for me to win than it is for things to be fair. So I am going to make sure that I win because my issues are more important and it's better for the country that I win, right? Or at least better for me.
Right.
Who knows?
It's at least better for my party if I win, right?
I kind of feel like both parties do it. Like both parties have done it. Both parties do it. There's an argument that the Republicans have done it more and to a greater extent.
Right.
But we'll get into that. But let's say the Democrats are like, we need to win because we literally can save the world. And the Republicans are like, we need to win because we need to put more money in our pockets. And back in 1812, it might have been the reverse. You know, parties change. But that's what happens is people get on these power trips and they think that they have to win and they will win at all costs. And so they gerrymander these boundaries to be unfair.
Right. Right. To favor their own party.
So, Kelly, let's take a poll.
Yeah.
I'd like to go ahead and just decide right now. Here, I can't believe it's not news. Where do we come down on the side of gerrymandering? If we could gerrymander our listeners and get more listeners,
right,
and maybe make another $1 to help pay for the podcast, would we do it? Would we gerrymander our listeners for our own benefit?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think that, I'd rather have our listeners spread out in different districts and make sure that they're all fairly represented.
I think so too.
Yeah. So
redistricting we're okay with.
Yeah, redistricting I'm fine with because like in the instance that you mentioned, I mean, Wyoming has, I want to say, and I'm just grasping at straws here, but I want to say that they probably have, there's like a minimum amount of representatives that you can have. And I want to say it's maybe 2, but it could be 5. And every state has 2 senators, but then they have a certain amount of representatives in the House.
You know what?
And those numbers changed. Tell me, do you know?
I think there's like 1 representative in Wyoming.
It could be 1. It could be 1. But I don't think it's more than 5.
Okay, let me see.
Because
I want to say Oregon only has 5. We used to have 4. So let me see what this says. It says so right here. 1 representative and 2 senators. Yeah. And I think Wyoming just has the 1 because remember that guy hit the reporter, Greg.
Oh, Gianforte, but I think he's a senator. I don't think he's a rep. I think he's a senator. Is he Greg Gianforte? I want to say that he's a senator. He's such a terrible person. The only reason I'm really remembering his name, and this is just
and he was Montana. Okay, so I'm sorry. So first of all, he's Montana.
He was Montana.
And he's the U.S. rep for Montana at large congressional district.
Oh, he is a rep? He is a rep?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He is a rep, and it sounds like at large would mean they only have 1.
Yeah.
Because it's not District 1 or 2 or whatever.
Yeah. So the reason that I even remembered his name is because he was the one offering his, and this will just tell you about our U.S. representatives and the amount of wealth that some of them have. He was the one who was offering his private plane to the senator who was going to have to be absent. He was going to be an absent vote on the Kavanaugh hearing. And Greg Gianforte offered him his private jet so that he could fly back from his daughter's wedding right after the vows so he could walk her down the aisle. And that's when Murkowski said that she would vote present and not no on the Kavanaugh vote, even though that is not okay. He could have just not been there because the chances are he might not have made it. Oh,
okay.
That just gets into something I don't even want to talk about because it makes me sad.
What is that saying? Believe somebody when they show you who they are the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah. He let us know who he was. And, there was a lot of people I remember watching that, election result. And there were a lot of people because that assault happened so close to the election. And so many people had already absentee ballot voted.
Right.
And they were like, can I change my vote?
Right.
Like, it was kind of, I remember that. So, okay.
He's so gross. He's
let us know and he's upheld that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. So, Kelly.
Yeah.
What is going on? Why is this so important that we talk about this today? as our final wrap up for the voting series?
So, to be honest, I feel like this might be one of the most important things we've talked about in this election series, because redistricting has such an effect on the average person's vote. So, when people say my vote doesn't matter, that is not true. However, the reason that so many people feel like their vote doesn't matter is because of things like gerrymandering, because redistricting is literally one of the most important ways, or is one of the biggest ways, that politicians can rob you of your vote. Because if they redistrict you into a district where you're, say, maybe 20% of your party, they've basically taken your voice for the entire district.
Right.
And that violates both your First Amendment constitutional right to free speech. I mean, if we can say that money and corporations have free speech and can give as much money to campaigns as they want, then obviously your vote is also considered part of free speech, and it's also part of the 14th Amendment. There's just so many things that your vote matters on. And so, we'll have infographics up to show what it looks like when someone gerrymanders a district. But basically, if you have 100 people in a district and say 40 are Republican, but 60 are Democrat, if you can draw that into a way where, say, 50 of those votes are in 2 districts and you make them both blue,
right,
but you have 3 more districts that are broken into the remainder, that's 15 each. No, I'm doing math wrong because I've had a glass of wine. So I'm not going to do math. But if you break it into pieces and parts where, say, you have 5 districts out of 100 people, and you put 2 of those districts into nothing but blue, and then the rest have a red bias over the top, you only have a small section of blue in those. You've
right,
redistricted to where you've made sure that even though you have a minority of people who are Republican, you're still getting a majority of the vote, and therefore you get the whole district.
Right. So, yeah, I definitely agree. This is the easiest way that your vote can be either weakened or strengthened. And depending on which party gerrymandered the district that you're in, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing is that we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but I want to talk about the down ballot, okay? Because you were talking about how important it is, people feel like they shouldn't, like their vote doesn't matter.
Right.
But the thing is that the down ballot is one of the most important things that you can vote on. And those are things that are as simple as your city council, people who are a county member, just these little things that people don't even pay attention to. They end up making a big difference. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later on and why it is so important to vote. Even if you're not feeling like you're making a difference at the national level, you are making a difference at the local level. So,
right.
Okay. So Kelly.
Yeah.
Throw me some science, girl. I know you have some science on this.
I do. I love to get the scientific facts on this. So I will say that I did pull up a study, and the study was from the University of Sydney. They published a study just maybe 2 years ago. So what they did is they analyzed 786 different state legislative plans between 1972 and 2014. And they found that 5 of the 10 worst Republican gerrymanders had been passed since 2010.
Yes,
that means
2010 was a banner year.
That's right. So that means that in 4 years, so from 2010 to 2014, were the worst gerrymandering years since 1972. And that's crazy because that's almost 40 years.
Right.
And then in 4 years, you surpass. That's insane. That means that the reason it's ramped up is because of things like technology, just making it easier to make these maps on the sly and make sure that you have so much easier access to be able to see where people are with their political parties. It's not like you have to go through big, long rolls. You don't have to go through lists anymore. Everything is digitized. So it's super easy for them to do. And they're doing it on a more frequent basis. They're not just doing it when there's a census. I just want to say, that's not to say that Democrats don't do it. They absolutely do. There are plenty of instances where they have. There's Maryland and Illinois are great states for examples, but I'm not going to get into the here's whys and hows just because literally the worst ones are Republicans. So we're going to just kind of focus on the gerrymandering itself, not just who's doing it. So I don't want to blame any party because I do know for a fact it happens on both sides.
Yes, it does. And I do want to put a pin in that because I'm going to talk about Project Red Map. Okay. And here's what I'm going to say. You might need a bucket. I wanted to puke when there's some pieces here that I think people have been putting together over time. And in looking at this information, I realized that there still might be pieces that we haven't found yet or don't know about yet. But there's so we're going to talk about the John Oliver episode about gerrymandering. Great episode about gerrymandering. And he had some points that were just a little bit mind-blowing and made you a little physically ill. You felt like you were maybe a little bit car sick. And then I listened to the Can He Do That podcast, How to Flip the House special, and their episode about 2010, which really focused on gerrymandering. And I full on needed a puke bucket. I mean, it was ridiculous. So I definitely want to talk about that, but I want to hear a little bit more first from you about how to steal an election.
Okay.
Or how to steal a district, right?
How to steal a district. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure we covered was, so who has the power to change these districts, right?
Right.
And what I found is that in 37 states, it's the state legislator has primary control of the redistricting, both for state legislative districts. So that means inside the state.
Right.
And for congressional districts, so both national and state. That means that in most states, the district lines are drawn by whatever party is currently in power.
Right.
So, my question is, what could go wrong? It's not like people in power want to stay in power, right?
It's if you let your kids be in charge of dinner, what could go wrong?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Here, mommy, I made you marshmallows with sugar on top. There's
that commercial where it's kind of funny, actually. The kids bring the lady princess toast, and she's like, I have no idea what princess toast is, but I know it's in my vitamins. But I see that princess toast every time, and that looks so disgusting. It's like bread with frosting and jelly beans on it. My kids would be all over that. Yeah, my kids would. My son would eat that. Yeah. And then he would follow it up with chocolate milk. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What can go wrong when you And here's the thing, when we elect representatives to our state legislator or Congress, we should be able to trust them to represent us correctly. But apparently they have proven time and time again that we cannot trust them with redistricting. Right. This seems to be a problem. And we've got 37 states that have put it into their hands. So what are the other states doing? Well, some of the other states have things like whole state parties that are in charge of redistricting that try to make it more fair. But I do want to point out one state in particular, because I always dog on Florida. Right. There is never a time that I'm like, Florida's doing something right, guys. And I understand as I'm writing this that Florida has just been hit by a hurricane, and yes. I'm so sorry. I feel terrible for the people affected. I hope everyone is safe. I still have family and friends there. In my heart, I really still love Florida. Yeah. But you are the easiest state to make fun of, except for Texas, because Ted Cruz. But right. But the one thing I will say is that Florida, this is a fun fact, Florida is one of the few states whose state constitution has specifically included language that prohibits gerrymandering across party lines. Who would have? Yeah, I know. No, wait. Who would have thought that Florida was ahead of the curve on this one? I feel they were already coming though. Do they decide by a duel with guns? I mean, I think that there might be alligators involved. Yeah, there's definitely beer involved. That because they have the state constitution language that it's better. So do we know how Florida does it? I think it involves a rifle, a gator, and a case of beer. So that was my concern.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that Busch Light is definitely in there somewhere as well.
Here's my concern. It shouldn't be beer. It should definitely be tequila. I mean, if it was a case...
Not in Florida, baby.
It was...
Beer is literally our water there. Have you seen our water? It's very dangerous. You don't want to drink it.
Margaritaville, isn't that like Florida Keys area?
Oh, that's the Florida Keys. That's
different.
The further south you go, you might as well not be in Florida anymore.
Yeah. Yes. The further north you are, the further south you are. I get it.
Yeah.
So, all right. So here we have Florida might actually have a good thing.
Right.
And so what else? Is this legal, Kelly? Is gerrymandering legal?
It totally is. And it's only legal on one side. So it's legal along partisan lines for right now because the Supreme Court has not decided. They've shoved cases back. So right now, according to the Supreme Court, it's okay along partisan lines. The only time it's not illegal is, according to the Supreme Court, from a 1993 case called Shaw versus Reno. The court ruled in a 5-4 decision, which honestly, seriously, Supreme Court, what's up with you? 5-4? They ruled that in a 5-4 decision that redistricting based on race should be held to a standard of strict scrutiny under the Equal Protection Clause. So while racial redistricting is definitely illegal throughout the country, redistricting along partisan lines is still definitely legal for now.
Now, I want to... So in that John Oliver special about gerrymandering, he does bring up...
Yeah.
There's some gerrymandered districts that look like ridiculous, but in fact, they're representing the same people. So there's this one famous district that looks like a pair of earmuffs, and it's connected by this one road. And he points out in there that the thing is that on both sides of this highway, it's highly Latino. And so it makes sense for that district to be together because they're represented. And then the people in the middle, it's a highly African-American district. So,
and I think that's Maryland.
And here's my question to you though. Like, what's the difference between racial redistricting and making sure that you're represented by your peers? Because we do have districts that are going to represent Latinos or African Americans or, Somalians and, whatever.
Right. Well, I think the difference is whether or not those people's voices are actually being heard. So we all know that the reason we vote is so that our vote matters. Our voice is heard in the national or in the statewide or in the countywide sphere. You're making a difference with your vote. So if they're taking those districts and they're breaking them into smaller and smaller places, what you'll end up with is whoever is the majority in that district is going to be the person who represents. So if you have 2 smaller Latino areas, but you join them together with a much higher, either say Caucasian or an African American, or I don't know. I'm trying to think of others, but it's floating through my mind. But if you make it to a point where they are so integrated that their voices aren't heard, then their interests aren't going to be represented when it comes to going to the state legislation. So say their community needs certain things, whether it's more translators at state legislation summits, things like that. They're not having anyone out there expressing what their needs are.
Right.
And that's a big deal. You always want to make sure, I struggle with, and this is, again, going off on a small tangent just based on personal experience. I struggle with the idea that, a lot of people talk about how we're more segregated now than we were in the 1960s. And while I agree with that most of the time, I feel like I'm okay if people want to segregate themselves because it makes them more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like we should have forced integration if people don't want that to happen. And that doesn't mean, the majority of white people don't want that to happen. It means we have a school here in Portland that is predominantly African American, and it's a charter school. And the reason that it exists and people have fought for it to exist is because kids seeing teachers of the same color as them, seeing people who are educated, seeing people who are maybe not represented in regular schools in every other school in Portland, it's important to them.
Right.
So, while I might struggle with the idea of, yes, I want more integration, it's also important to have the ability to step back and say, well, what is best for this community?
Right. And I think my point in bringing this up is that racial redistricting might not be, oh, this district is all African American, or this district is all Latino.
Right.
That is actually can be a very good thing. And actually in our episode 2, we talked about that lawsuit against that community that was mostly African American and had never elected an African American city councilman, and they got sued.
Yes.
Sense when you think about it in this way is that they were saying, like, we aren't getting representation, even though the majority of the people here are African American, they are not getting elected. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because I think when you hear the word racial redistricting, you automatically think like, oh, they're trying to put them all together, and that's bad, but that's actually a good thing. You have to have representation, and different cultures might have different needs, just maybe even just different neighborhoods. It might not just be a race thing. You can have poor economic neighborhoods that have very different needs than a neighborhood that's right next to it that is a very rich area.
Right.
And if you lump them together, the poor part might not get what they need versus the rich part, because who's going to have more ability to get elected? Who's going to have more representation? Who's going to have a bigger voice? So it's not just about race, but that is something that can be a cultural defining thing that is very important to have representation. So anyway.
No, absolutely. I'm glad you brought up the socioeconomic status breach as well, because that's definitely it can be a huge factor.
Sociology major here. So, culture.
Oh yeah, there you go. I'm glad you brought that in.
Yeah, that's my shtick. All right. Yeah. So here's the thing. Can we and should we stop gerrymandering?
Well, I definitely think we should.
Like, again, I think we have to go back to our poll at the beginning. We are good with redistricting, bad with gerrymandering.
That's right. Because the whole point of gerrymandering is just making sure that one party wins over another.
And I think the word gerrymandering has become synonymous with redistricting. People use that as they think that's what it is.
Right.
Like, they use the word gerrymandering just to mean redistricting. And we have to stop that.
Right. Because there is a difference. Not every district gets gerrymandered. And when it happens, it's usually pretty easy to see. And I know that we have at least 3 infographics that we have up. One is a very generic, but the other 2 are very specific cases. And cases as in court cases that are currently going on right now. Do you want to talk about either one of those court cases?
I want to talk about the makeup cases. I was just
the new Anna Sui makeup cases from ModCloth, because I saw those today.
Yeah. And by the way, if you want to purchase any makeup cases, contact us at podcastfakenews@gmail.com.
Yeah. We'll send you a link of our favorite.
Yeah.
I like caboodles because I'm old school.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. There's one way for gerrymandering to be stopped is through lawsuits, right?
Right.
So if somebody feels like, hey, there's been way too much gerrymandering, they can file a lawsuit. And a very recent example of this is the Wisconsin case of Gill versus Whitford, which alleged that in 2011, the Republican-led legislator in Wisconsin withdrew the state maps to heavily favor their own party, which I think we can just say that's true. I don't know if we have to say alleged. They used a method called packing and cracking.
Yes.
Wherein they packed the Democratic voters into just a few districts, and then they cracked any leftover Democratic voters by splitting the areas and spreading their vote across several districts, thus giving them the majority of the votes per area. So Gill versus Whitford has gone all the way to the Supreme Court, who said, go back and try again. To the plaintiffs, they said basically that they had focused too much on whether or not the whole state had been gerrymandered, and they wanted to go back and focus on the districts. Now, Kelly, we've talked a lot about the Supreme Court. Do cases start at the Supreme Court level?
No, they rarely ever do.
Yeah.
They normally are on at least the 4th round by the time they get to the Supreme Court, depending on how big or small the case is.
Right. So it has already been through a couple different courts, and I believe they have said, yeah, you guys gerrymandered the fuck out of Wisconsin. Like
Right.
you took a cheese curd at best and used it to draw lines, So
Yeah.
so what they did, so in 2008, we have this demographic here, or this infographic here. You can see in 2008 that Democrats had 52 seats and Republicans had 46. And the votes for Democrats were like 1.4 million. The votes for Republicans were 1.1. So that makes sense. Like the Democrats had more votes and more seats.
Right. Right.
In the 2010 plan, it went down to, okay. Democrats
Not a lot of people voted because you see that was a midterm election.
Yeah. So there was a switch here. So the seats went down for the Democrats to 38. Republicans went up to 60. About 800,000 Democrats voted and 1.1 Republicans again. So actually the number of Republican voters didn't change. It's just a whole bunch of Democratic voters didn't vote. Sounds like.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And that's so super common in midterms. That's why Democrats are pushing to get out the vote right now.
Exactly. Please fucking vote.
Please vote. Please fucking vote.
Now, the 2012, now this is under the current gerrymandered districts. Democrats back up to 1.4 million votes. Republicans up to 1.2. So they went up a little bit.
Right.
Democrats went from 38 to 39 seats. And Republicans stayed at 6.
Right.
So we're back at the levels of them voting 1.4, where in 2008, the Democrats had 52 seats, and now they only have 39 with the same amount of votes.
Right. And if you look at the tallies on those, you see that the votes for Democrats, it's over 50%, but yet they're sitting at 39 seats as opposed to 60.
So what that means is that the Wisconsin legislature is controlled by the Republican Party, even though more Democrats in Wisconsin voted for Democratic legislation. And that, my friends, is where you need to get your puke buckets out and just have it handy because it gets
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty bad one. That's a really bad one. Okay, Kelly, walk us through another one here.
Yeah, so I'm going to walk you through the other one that we really looked at, which is a case called Common Cause versus Rucho, and that was brought in the state of North Carolina. North Carolina is known for its anti-women.
What?
And slightly racist. By that, I mean really racist laws in the past 10 years.
But low property prices if you want acreage.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Let's all move there. So in this case, Common Cause, who was joined really quickly by the League of Women Voters, challenged the state legislators that the maps drawn in 2016 were unconstitutional. In August of this year, a 3-judge panel found their case was, and that's August of 2018, this just happened, found their case was valid and ordered the maps to be redrawn. The North Carolina General Assembly filed a notice of appeal, which would take this case to the Supreme Court next year, because in a court, when a 3-judge panel has made a decision, if you're appealing, it automatically goes to the Supreme Court. And that's just a rule of law. But you'll see that there's an infographic. We're going to put it up on our website. You'll see that in 2012, the U.S. House races in North Carolina, because this is what it's in regard to, the votes won statewide were 51% Democrat, 49% Republican, yet the seats won. So 49% Republican won 69% of the seats. 51% of the votes were Democrat, but they won 31% of the seats. That's some shit right there.
Right. So, yes.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
Sorry to make you throw up.
Okay. Had to go grab the saltines.
Get some ginger ale. Okay. Buckle up.
Okay. All right. So here's the thing. We're a podcast about fake news, right?
Right.
So is there fake news about gerrymandering?
There's not so much fake news as much as it is just, this is literally fake shit that they're doing. This is fake shit they're doing all over our country, and we need to call them out on it.
Yeah, so I kind of looked around just to see if there were any articles I could pull.
Yeah.
But I really wasn't finding anything. And it's literally like, you can't make this stuff up.
I know.
Like, you don't have to. It's literally, this is what it is.
Right.
But I think the facts are, too, that there's nothing that Congress or the Senate has to do at a national level in order to have the maps redrawn. It has to be done every 10 years. Right. And so there's no reason to rile the base to gerrymander, right? Like, how many times have you ever heard of district redrawing as a reason to vote for a candidate?
Yeah, I don't remember ever. I mean, I might remember someone talking about gerrymandering, but I don't remember it being used ever in like a campaign ad or any sort of campaign slogan, nothing like that. Like
Paul Evans right now is running for state legislator here. So like, Paul Evans for fair redistricting. Yeah, you don't hear that. Like, no. And maybe people have done it, but it's not something that I've seen a lot of, like, hey, this is something that, vote for me because I'm going to make sure that the districts are drawn fairly. Like, I think it's one of those things where, again, it's mandatory, it's boring, and it's just considered part of something that they do.
Right.
It's not necessarily like something that people really even think about when they're voting. So here's the thing. Somebody thought about it, and I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
So I listened to that podcast, Can He Do That? It's by the Washington Post. So they did this 3-part series called How to Flip the House. And I really recommend this. It's not going to be my jam of the week because I have a different jam.
Yeah.
But I definitely recommend that everybody go listen to these 3 episodes as soon as you're done getting caught up on ours, because come on. But they did an episode about 1994. In 1994, I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I remember when the House flipped in 1994. I remember that. Oh, okay, this is really interesting to hear this history.
Right.
Right? And then they talked about 2006 when the Democrats flipped the House back. And again, it was like, oh, that was fun and interesting to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 2010 episode, and I wanted to fucking rage.
Yeah.
And throw up. And I was so distraught. And it's a really good episode. You should absolutely go listen to it. But just be prepared that it's going to fucking piss you off to no end that this happened. So basically, this person figured out that, hey, who does redistricting? State legislators, right? And it's really expensive to get people elected to Congress, but it's not very expensive to get people elected as state legislators. It's like pennies on the dollar.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you can throw $100,000 at a congressional race and not see any movement. You can throw $100,000 at a state race and get somebody elected. So this project was formed, and it was called Project Red Map. And that's short for the Redistricting Majority Project. Not Red Map as in we want to make the map Republican. It just so happens that that's their acronym.
I mean, it's really on the nose, though, isn't it?
Yeah. So this was the project of the Republican State Leadership Committee. And its goal was to increase Republican control of the congressional seats as well as state legislators, largely through determination of electoral district boundaries. So basically, they were relying on making effective use of partisan gerrymandering by relying on previously unavailable mapping software to improve the precision, which district lines are strategically drawn. And I am looking at the Wikipedia page for Red Map.
Mm-hmm.
So the strategy was focused on swing blue states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. Did these states sound familiar?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
And they might have come in handy maybe a couple of years ago.
So these were states that had a Democratic majority, but which they could swing towards Republican with appropriate redistricting. So they raised about $30 million, and they were able to successfully do what they set out to do.
Mm-hmm.
They bought these states, basically, for the Republicans in order to be able to redistrict them with partisan gerrymandering so that they could get more Republicans into Congress.
Yeah. And am I right in saying that 2010, they picked up 675 legislative seats? Yep. In 2010 state races, Republicans picked up 675 legislative seats, gaining complete control over 12 state legislators.
Yes. And this Project Red Map is pretty much responsible for this. Now, they say in the episode, the guy was like, hey, we were completely transparent about this. We were literally calling radio shows saying, hey, we're doing this. And they were like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
The Democrats missed a huge boat in not realizing or understanding how important the down ballot is. Yeah. And that's what I was talking about earlier. So I said I want to put a pen in this and come back to this, because the down ballot is literally one of the most important things. And this has taught us that. And if we don't learn this lesson, we're screwed. And I think we have. I mean, you hear it like on Pod Save America all the time. They're always talking about the down ballot, the down ballot, the down ballot. This is why we have to be represented correctly based on the amount of Democrats. We have more Democrats with less representation that due to gerrymandering, literally.
Yes.
I mean, it's just insane. And I understand that as a Republican, as a conservative, as a white male living in rural America, you start to panic when you think that your power is going to be taken away from you. And so you do whatever you can do to hold on to that and to tighten it. I understand that that's that pressure, that anxiety that they're feeling, and I don't fucking care. You don't get to take away the representation of the majority of the people of the US because you're fucking scared.
Right. Or because you don't want to lose the power that you already have. The power and the privilege that you already have, just based on nothing but where you live and your race or how much money you have. It's just, I mean, I'm right there with you. I mean, Karl Rove, may he rot in hell.
It was part of this.
He was. He is part of every evil thing that has happened in the past. I don't know. There's part of me that wonders if he's a fucking vampire and he was responsible for World War II and World War I and all the other fucking world wars. He's a terrible, terrible human being. He's a terrible, terrible human being. And he fucked up American politics. And he wasn't alone. I mean, the Koch brothers definitely have been doing this for decades and decades as well. But I will tell you something that I thought about when I was doing this. And there were a couple of places that just mentioned it really small. But I want to tell you something. I think that this can be fixed.
Yes, I agree.
Because so many people seem to get fixated on, we need an independent committee. We need to just have a separate party that does this, who is a completely neutral party. And I think that we have an easier solution. I think that you are just looking at numbers and you're just looking at percentages, and you know how to make something that's really easy for that. You have simple algorithms that people use every day. And I think that there has to be a way that you can put numbers into an algorithm every 10 years and redraw these district maps based on just pure numbers.
Right.
Not based on race or party obviously those factors play into the numbers that come up in the census. But it just seems that numbers and algorithms, obviously they can be skewed, but I think when you just have basic math and you take people out of the equation and it falls all along the same exact equation, I think you're more likely to hit something that is a more equitable solution for everyone.
I think I agree to an extent. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle, because I think we do have to be cognizant of the fact that certain groups need representation. And if we do just go by an algorithm and the math, then there might be people who get disenfranchised by that because they're, lumped in because they're in that poor neighborhood next to the rich neighborhood, right? So I think it's somewhere in the middle where, yes, the algorithm can probably get you, 75% of the way there. and then you have some tweakings to be done, because those earmuff districts do need to exist. There does need to be that specialization based on the needs of the community. And I do like the idea of the independent councils. I think there are states that are doing that. It does seem like this is one of those things where they will look back in a couple of 100 years and say, I can't believe they used to do it that way. I can't believe they used to let...
You're so silly. With climate change, there's not going to be people in 100 years. We're going to be fish people. That's what we're going to be by that point.
Yeah, that's true. We'll be living in a bubble. There won't be districts.
The fucking polar bears will have taken over. They'll be like, bitch, you took all of our fish and you made all the ice caps disappear. Fuck you. We're coming for you.
You know what, Kelly? So before the episode, I was telling you that there's this chair I want to buy that's like kind of, it's not super expensive, but it's just like, do I need to spend the money on that right now? You know what? Fuck it. Who cares?
Does it float?
I'm going to go buy that chair.
I mean, just check and see if it has a inflatable button on it. So, if the floods come, you can...
It doesn't, but when am I going to have to pay that credit card off? Who cares?
You have a point. Do you have until 2050? Because that's when we're all supposed to be wiped out.
I can do that. Well, that was a turn I wasn't expecting. Thank you for the climate change.
Sure, anytime. I can always make it worse, Beth.
Right.
It's a talent.
I was feeling good that we were going to come out of this.
Sorry, we should probably do our jam of the week, and that will leave us on a happy note.
Well, hey, it's your turn to go first.
It's my turn to go first. Okay. Woo, woo. So, in a change of pace, because I know I did a song last week, but it wasn't a very uplifting song.
No, but wasn't it kind of fun to be like, hey, here's my song, go listen to it?
Yeah, it was. It was nice. So I turned 40 back in July, and I got a present from my husband that was super duper amazing. He got me tickets to go see Beyonce and Jay-Z in their On the Run 2 tour.
Ooh.
Which I've been to so many concerts in my life, but this might be the biggest freaking concert. I mean, I think that there were like 60,000 people there. It was crazy. And my 40-year-old ass got home at 3:30 in the morning and still went to work the next day. So my jam of the week is the Carters, which is Beyonce and Jay-Z. They put out an album this past summer, and it's called The Carters. And my song is Ape Shit. Because literally, I went apeshit when I got the tickets, and I went apeshit in that concert. It was unbelievable. And if you ever get to see them in concert, do it. It is an amazing, amazing performance.
Nice. Well, actually, I just going to mention really quick, you and I are going to go see My Favorite Murder like next week.
I mean, that's only second to Beyonce and Jay-Z.
Oh my God. I'm so excited for this.
I know.
This is going to be amazing. We're definitely we're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
So yes. And we are going to go apeshit, I'm sure.
Yes.
Karen has got to say, here's the thing.
Look,
here's the thing. Oh my gosh. That's going to be amazing. Okay. So here is my jam of the week. Now this wasn't going to be my jam of the week, but I was scrolling through my music to grab the song to send to you that I was going to use. And I saw this and I just started laughing so hard. I was like, I have to do this. So
it's pretty great.
And just recognizing gerrymandering, my jam of the week is Ed Sheeran's The Shape of You. So I just thought that is the perfect fit for a gerrymandering episode.
It is. It is. You really made it right in there. Because I was like, can I fit apeshit in with just being like, you should go apeshit over this?
Yes, that is true too. But and actually, I do like this song. I'm not like a big like pop fan, which you may already realize that from my previous jams. And so I'm not like a big Ed Sheeran fan. I don't have any of his other songs, but I listened to this podcast called Song Exploder. And it breaks down, basically they interview an artist about how they put a song together. Yeah. And it's really interesting. It's a very good, the guy's name I can never repronounce, like Riki Kohishi or something. And the way he has this very smooth voice and it's very professionally done. And I'm always super jealous when I listen to his podcast because I'm like, wow, you actually have like editing. Okay. But they did an episode of Ed Sheeran's The Shape of You. And so that's where I heard it, was on the podcast and heard about it. And one thing I do remember from that episode is after one of the producers gave him that saying, "The shape of you." It's like from a country where he's from, that's something that they say, like instead of saying like, "I like you," or something, "I like the shape of you." And so that's where they got that saying. And then after they made the song, they got it all done. Ed Sheeran took it to like his producers and said like, "Hey, I've made this great song and I think it would be good for this person." And they were like, "Are you crazy? Why would this song is amazing and you already have it recorded with you. Why are you trying to give it away?" And he was like, "Oh, well, I guess if you want me to keep it." And it's become like his biggest hit.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's the only, when I heard it tonight, when you sent it to me, I was like, oh, I know this song.
Yeah.
And I've only listened to an Ed Sheeran CD one time because I had a coworker who really wanted to listen to it on a drive over to Seaside. Okay. And I was like, sure. That's okay. We can do that. Yeah. We can do that if that's what you want. So I still have an Ed Sheeran CD in my car that I've listened to once because she forgot to take it.
Oh, you better get that back to her.
Yeah, I probably should because I'm never going to listen to it. But I do like that song. Yeah, I did like that song. It's a fun song.
It's got a fun little beat, and it was perfect for gerrymandering. So
yeah, I like Song Exploder. That's where I think we talked about this on the phone one time.
I think I recommended it to you.
Yeah, you recommended it to me, and then I listened to an episode on. Oh, I know who it was. It was St. Vincent. It was the song New York. And that was where I was like, oh my God, I really liked her. Now I love her.
Yeah. I like listening to that podcast. It's not a lot of mainstream songs or artists.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's some sprinkled in there. Like, I think there was an episode with Metallica. You know, I mean, it's like, there was a 9 Inch Nails one. And then like.
There was a 9 Inch Nails one, and it wasn't a really popular song. I did listen to it, but I don't remember what song it was. It was something really. Either.
But then you'll have these artists that I've never heard of, and then, you know, you'll have some really cool songs, and it's just like, hey, and it's just kind of fun to hear the process of a song.
Yeah.
And to hear like how long some of these take, like some of them, it's like years that they were like, oh, I had this beat and I just kept it. And then like 2 years later, I pulled it up and, you know.
Right.
It's just kind of interesting. I don't always love the songs. I mean, just to be honest, but it's always a very interesting episode. So,
yeah.
Anyway, well, hey, if you like our podcast, don't forget to subscribe and rate and review us and help other people find us. And you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Podcast Fake News. We have our email at podcastfakenews@gmail.com. And then we have our blog at podcastfakenews.com. There's a theme here.
There is. Go to our episode guide. We have a blog every episode, and we break down everything we talk about and have infographics and all of our sources.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, just a little brag, like, our blog is really good.
It is really good. Yeah.
So it's maybe even better than the episodes, just depending on if you want serious information versus.
But it is pretty easy to read.
Yeah. No, I think it's really good. So I'm very proud of our blog, and Kelly does a lot of work on it. So go enjoy her hard work. And then go over to Patreon and give us $1 a month.
Just give us $1 because you like us.
We're seriously not going to give you anything in return at this point. I just think it's a lost cause. But we'll
keep doing this podcast and we'll keep doing all the great research that we've been doing.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Okay, guys, until next time, don't forget, spread jam.
Not lies.